Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, June 23rd, 2020. Time for another show. And if you're out of money, good news. The Republican Party, apparently, in Washington, D.C., has... who did I see just the other day using that in a commercial? Washington. Never could figure that one out. Anyway, Republicans have got it all solved for you. You recall, of course, when we were generously offered a whopping $1,200 to cover all of the food and rent and or mortgage and any other expenses we might have during, 3, 4, 5 months of lockdown for the pandemic. Martha McSally, a senator who has never been elected to that office for whatever reason, has got a solution in mind for us. I mean, I don't think it goes anywhere, but apparently she actually has publicly acknowledged authoring a bill aimed at offering up $4,000 per person, per taxpayer anyway, per person tax credits for taking a vacation, which is an amazing thing to do. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've got the time to do it. And because now we're being paid to do it, apparently, so long as I do it outside of my house, which is, of course, the opposite of a lockdown. And I guess that's what was maybe motivating her in doing this. But, of course, this goes against all scientific evidence and all common sense. The idea, of course, that, $1,200 will cover all your food and rent. But we want to make sure you don't run short on vacation. Like she had sat around and said, how much does one of these regular person vacations cost? What could it be? $4,000 or $5,000 per person? I mean, come on. Let's just do it already. Stop beating around the bush and nickel and diming everyone to death. A family of 4 should take a $9,000 vacation. Apparently there's $500 extra for your dependent children. I don't know how they came to that number either. $4,000 for you, an adult, to take a vacation. $500 for you, a smaller human being, to occupy a hotel room, eat food, and participate in, touristy activities out there. You can be doing it for $500 because, I guess, children's discount. I don't really know what they were thinking, but talk about your disconnection from reality. I can't imagine anything quite as disconnected as that, but she's out there campaigning for her first, what would be her first election to the office that she actually holds. Remember, she's appointed. And, spectacular fashion, really, right out of the gate. A couple of years into her service, she's finally come up with some legislation. And, 3-4 months into the pandemic, I know how I'll solve it: vacation. I just thought that was kind of interesting. $1,200 to eat, $4,000 for a vacation. $1,200, by the way, to stay home and not risk spreading or catching the coronavirus while you stay home from work. So $1,200 to not work while you're at home, preventing other people from catching the virus and helping yourself not catch it. Or for that matter, and why not do both? $4,000 to not work and go F off somewhere else in your state or any other. Apparently you got to go 50 miles away from home in order to be able to claim the money. There's all sorts of problems with it. I mean, it's a tax credit, it's a non-refundable tax credit, so you have to front the money yourself. So in other words, it's not available to people who don't have $9,000 to spend on a vacation and then wait for reimbursement. So that's one thing. Some people think that's the top issue with it, and my top issue with it is idiotic from the start. But you know me, I always nitpick and start on the little things. I found that really fascinating. So here's money to stay home and help not spread the virus, or here's 4 times as much money to go risk everything and also don't work, which was supposed to be the big deal here. We cannot have people working our economy, but my economy. But I guess maybe the thinking is, well, those people working in the tourist sector of the economy will love it. It'll all trickle down, and all of the people who are selling tickets to see the world's biggest ball of yarn will go out and buy yachts, I guess. Of course, they'll have to take vacations from those tourist attractions in order to go spend that money, and then the tourist attraction will close, and economists have not figured this problem out yet. All right. Well, anyway, I found that rather remarkable, even in the middle of so very much idiocy that there is out there for us to share. But as you know, Daily Kos Radio is live. Now, I found this out just recently by speaking on the Twitter machine, the small box on my desk, with Bill in Portland, Maine, who tells me that this is the case. Here's what's up for the show today, in his estimation, which, is as good as any, really, at this point. Daily Kos Radio now being live. Me, David Waldman. You find me as Kagro X on Twitter and maybe some other places that I forgot to change my name at. Well, I'm going to come up with a daring suggestion. Look for a minute there like it was a darling suggestion, which it might also be. But a daring suggestion for putting our republic back together. Glue. Why not? Why not be the glue that holds our republic together, everyone? Just regular glue from your kitchen drawer. Just find it, open up the drawer, see what's in there. But not that little tube of super glue, because that dried out months ago. You'll never get that out of the tube, right? Try Elmer's. That stuff stays, stays soft, stays crunchy in milk as well. I don't know whether that's really true, but it's sort of an advertising line, and I thought I would throw it in there because isn't that what humans do? $4,000 for a vacation. You speak of things in terms of as though they were a breakfast cereal to get people to get comfortable with the idea of buying one. Stays crispy, stays crunchy in milk, part of a complete breakfast, something like that. Toast, juice, milk, and munchy, crunchy glue. Really, why not try that as well? Breaking news on the coronavirus front, just because it really did just break in front of me anyway. World's #1 tennis player. That's not you, the guy with the coffee mug that says that. That was just a joke. Your kids like you and, whatever. But the real world's #1 tennis player, as it turns out, Novak Djokovic, right? I have that right. Isn't that how he pronounces that? That I've heard out loud. I've heard that on the news and on the television when you flip by. Well, he's tested positive for coronavirus after hosting a tournament, which I think they would normally tell you, bad idea. In the age of coronavirus, bringing in a rotating cast of people and officials and fans, etc. Where was the tournament? Well, it was in home grounds, Serbia and Croatia, where nothing bad ever happens. So I figure, it was safe, right? The world's top-ranked tennis player, Novak Djokovic, said on Tuesday that he tested positive for the novel coronavirus. That's what they're calling it. After participating in an exhibition series that he organized in Serbia and Croatia. Djokovic, who is Serbian, is the fourth player who participated in matches last week in Belgrade, Serbia's capital and largest city, and in Zadar, Croatia. Zadar, I don't know. Is that radar with a Z? Who knows? Maybe it's Zadar. I have no idea. I haven't been to either one. Lovely places these days. Anyway, that was over the weekend, and apparently I see. He was the fourth player to test positive over the weekend. So it was a big weekend. Weekend at Novak's, and 4 people got coronavirus. And the weekend in Tulsa, we're now up to, I think, 6 campaign workers and 2 Secret Service agents. Who knows? Maybe more Secret Service agents got it too, but they're being very secretive about it. And they also test positive now for the coronavirus after the big rally weekend. So it's big news for big names getting coronavirus, or at least those in close proximity to big names. I'm distracted now. There's something in my email here. I see. That appears to be in relation to the show. I thought I would open it up and see what was going on, but it's don't worry about it. It's garbage. It's not that somebody sent me a bad idea and I'm bad mouthing it here. It's one of those social media or whatever, the social networking sites that every once in a while says someone wants to connect with you. And I don't know. I signed up for it at some point. I think somebody I knew had signed up for it and said, you should sign up for it and put your business name in and, use Kagro in the morning and whatever. And I was like, well, I don't want to insult the person who said I should connect with them, so I'll connect with them. But what do I need this thing for? I don't know. It's not a real business per se. Like, I'm not trying to sell anything. I guess subscriptions, surely. But I just didn't think this one was going to work. But anyway, there you have it. That's what's distracting me this morning. I could be distracted by larger issues like the president doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on the story that he does, in fact, believe that testing for the coronavirus is causing the disease, COVID-19, and we refuse to acknowledge that. We refuse to believe it. We refuse to accept the fact that he's a lunatic and delusional guy is in charge of our pandemic response, and it's going to kill not just us, but many, many people around the world. When the United States fails in addressing a deadly global pandemic, it's bad news for everyone. But there he is out there doing it again, and we're all sort of like, huh. So, whatever. We're going to normalize whatever idiocy it is that he says. We're going to normalize his thinking that the stealth fighter is invisible. We're going to normalize his orange face paint. We're going to normalize his belief that windmills noise causes cancer, and just soldier on and then execute his orders and pretend that the paperwork that he signed is valid. People still trying to sort out what happened at the Department of Justice in the Southern District of New York. Still working on that one. And I was reminded this morning, just thinking about it, I can't believe we fell for this again. As you know, as listeners to the show, I've been saying forever that there's just no point in pretending that his orders or his claims that he's going to do something or that he signed something are true. I've been begging literally since day one of the Trump administration, and even from before day one, I think, in the Trump administration, because we were preparing ahead of time for this. What should we be doing in Congress, which got sworn in before Trump got sworn in? If he got sworn in. I don't know. Dramatic music, please. Maybe he wasn't sworn in. I don't know. Anyway, but I've been saying for a long time, as long as that even just as a delaying tactic, people in Congress ought not to be accepting what purports to be written communications from the president or from the office of the president. They should make him come in there and either say it or sign it in front of them, just as a delaying tactic. But as it turns out, it bore out as truth. It's a rare thing that any of his paperwork is in order, or that it's been completed, or that it's even valid, or that it even exists. And this is just the latest example of it. We discussed it as though we haven't been talking about this for years. And even for those people who are late to picking up the theme, you've seen it before. At the goddamn Department of Justice. I mean, come on. The whole thing has played out before. Matt Whitaker, in his nomination to serve as acting attorney general, his paperwork was missing for months, and they wouldn't produce it, and they couldn't produce it because it didn't exist. We've already been through this at the highest levels of the Department of Justice, and we're still like, oh, this is really happening. This is really happening again. This has happened before. Like within months? Wow, it's just crazy that we can't remember these things. I don't know what to do. So, I guess anything can be normalized. So that opens the door for a lot of interesting things that we might want to normalize. This morning I thought, hey, what if we started to normalize the idea that, as we've discussed in the past, just purely in political science terms, we've discussed it in this show, that voting is supposed to be a proxy for a substitute for the use of force to achieve political ends, and that the prospect of having a free and fair election and using it to replace a corrupt or even maniacally homicidal president of the United States, or to use impeachment for those ends, but that's been foreclosed to us, that option. But the prospect of a free and fair election is supposed to stand in to entice us to wait, to entice us not to exercise the other option of might makes right, and for rabid crowds to overwhelm his Praetorian Guard, drag the president out of the presidential palace, and deal with him as they may. As historically, let's see, they've beaten them to death. Not presidents of the United States, but political leaders. Burned them alive, beheaded them. That's another one that people do. Hang them, shot them. I mean, all sorts of things have happened over the years. No shortage of options for crowd violence against the leader. Do I recommend it? No, I like the voting proxy a lot better. But, you have problems like when impeachment, which is also a good proxy, is foreclosed to you due to corruption. You could say, well, we'll bide our time and have a free and fair election. But if that's foreclosed to you, one option is to sit on your hands and wait and see if he executes you, just for fun. But, like I said, in the middle of a global pandemic, to sit on your hands, to spread misinformation, to tell people that the testing that's actually going to save their lives is going to, in fact, cost them their lives, and do the opposite and defy everything and kill potentially hundreds of thousands of Americans, potentially millions of people around the world because of America's unique role in the world, and now its unique role as the single biggest hotbed of COVID-19 the world has ever seen, like no one has ever seen before, and people really haven't seen it before. Well, in the face of all of this, traditionally we've been able to rely on, well, at least we'll have the option to do this non-violently. But, maybe we don't have that option anymore, and I don't know. It's something to ponder, just something to discuss, and, got to be careful how you discuss it and all that. All I'm saying is we'll see what happens. The voting aspect of things that's supposed to serve as a proxy, traditionally throughout most of human history, I'm just saying that has not been the case. It's a relatively recent phenomenon. And it hasn't really been tested like this. So maybe the thing to normalize, well, we're normalizing things. If you can normalize orange face paint, if you can normalize windmills cause cancer, airplanes are invisible, testing causes COVID-19, it shouldn't be a stretch to normalize the idea that it's access to free and fair elections that keeps us out of the mode in which the despot is dragged from the palace and murdered by the people. I mean, maybe you should normalize discussion of the execution of Donald Trump. I don't know if it's a great idea. Long term, it's probably a lousy one. And you don't want to arm Republican wackos with the idea that that's an okay thing to do for a president. But, and they can take their cues from anything. Well, it's only okay, and it's not okay. It's a terrible tragedy. Of course. But it only happens, or the system that we've put in place only contemplates it's happening if you refuse to offer any other alternative. I mean, it's not a political science system. It's just sort of a reality of the way things are. You tell people that they cannot change anything about what's going on, though it's intolerable, and someone will decide not to tolerate it, and then that idea will spread, and then it won't be tolerated, but in a really gruesome way. But, so long as you have the outlet of free and fair elections, et cetera, it should all be fine. But then, how Republicans operate, they'll just declare, oh, we also don't have that option because we say so. I mean, just make up your reasons, and then they'll go and do it. So, you don't want to put that idea in their hands. It's not uncommon for them to do that. They just make up the circumstances they need. How much did you really need that sort of illustrated for you? Cops planting weapons or drugs on people. We wanted to beat the shit out of this guy. I'm not supposed to say that, but I just did anyway. But as you know, we're not FCC regulated, so I guess we'll get away with that one. I wonder if I'll bleep that. I'll have to think about whether I want to bleep that or not mark the clean notation for Apple Podcasts. Anyway, we're not supposed to beat the crap out of that guy, but we did. And we know that, for instance, if he were to complain and take us to court, etc., we would be in trouble unless, of course, he was resisting arrest. So we should be saying that he's resisting arrest. And that's why when we smack the crap out of people with batons and shoot them, we say, stop resisting, in case someone's recording. then there should be a video record of our noting for the record that he's resisting, you see. Or, why did I pull you over? I don't know. I pulled you over because you were black and I thought I might be able to beat the crap out of you. But now that you ask, you have a broken taillight. Smash. Hey, you just broke that taillight. What? No, I didn't. You know how that goes. Another example of it, as a matter of fact, actually sort of a slightly different context, just speaking about police, happened to see some video last night from, I guess there are protests again everywhere, but the protests are on again, or maybe never left really, from Lafayette Square Park, where there is prominently displayed, ironically, probably in it's not ironic, but just dumb, we're probably in the spot where you thought that maybe a statue of Lafayette might be, in Lafayette Square Park. There is instead a statue of Andrew Jackson, which, you know the history of Andrew Jackson, and people kind of maybe would want to get rid of that statue, and toppling statues is a big pastime now, and people are into it, and I guess they're after the possibility of removing that statue as well. So that sets up another big showdown, et cetera, et cetera. The president, I think this morning, is already tweeting threats at people, probably from the bunker. Anyway, so big confrontation between police and protesters that I'm assuming, and maybe I'm wrong, was actually in Lafayette Square Park yesterday. Anyway, wherever this was happening, someone was pointing out that among the police in their riot gear and shields was one sort of unmarked person who there was no identifying information with what police agency this person was with, what federal agency, if that was the case, this person might be with, dressed in camouflage fatigues and with battle armor, etc., and baton, just like everybody else, and participating in the police line that was shoving everybody back, saying, get back, barking out that order, get back. And the people who were being pushed back, the protesters, saying, who is this guy? And you hear them on the video actually saying, who is this person? They don't identify themselves. Who are you with? And, the guy would just take a swing at you with his baton for getting close enough to ask. And then eventually, I think some of the other cops kind of got uncomfortable, and they answered after a fashion, telling the protesters, we don't know. I don't know who he is. We'll just move back. To them, the big priority was having people move back, not answering questions about who is that person next to you who's also saying move back. But that's a big question. You can't just cosplay through this. And people were shouting out, they were shouting to the cops. Is that a federal agent? Is that an official of some kind? Or is that just a vigilante who has decided to dress up and you've decided to allow to stand alongside you and take swings at people with batons? And it's not entirely clear that it could be just, I don't know, and maybe it's somebody from the National Guard, and I'm assuming who else would come out and just for fun try and, as they would say, quell a riot. But it seems to be a lot of fun for a lot of cops to be able to swing freely at people and fire ordnance at them without having to fill out paperwork, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not beyond the pale that somebody might just be doing it for fun. And I was reminded, for those of you who might think that that's too outlandish, probably nobody in this listening audience thinks that's too outlandish, but maybe people out there in Twitter world. But I was trying to say to people, this is something that cops do, and I was reminded of the story back from, believe it or not, from Tulsa, Oklahoma, a couple of years ago. There was just such an incident. You remember these stories, and then we turned up that it was happening all over the country. This was just a particularly egregious example where people who were donating money to the police or donating equipment to the police or whatever, local businessmen, high-dollar donors were sort of trading that in for designation as a reserve officer, a reserve police officer. And they were riding along with cops and acting as police out there. Now, as it turns out, the guy also faked up all sorts of other credentials. But you remember this guy, right? What was his name? It was like Robert Barnes, was it? I'll scroll back. I was tweeting about it last night, and I had to, it's funny, I said, you all remember this guy, right? And then I realized I don't remember the guy's name. So I'll look it up. But what I do remember is the name of the person this went all the way here. They let this guy ride around and pretend he was a cop because he gave them money. That's the bottom line. And he killed somebody. I mean, that's how far it went. If you think, oh, well, the cops would never let a guy just dress up and pretend to be a cop and take swings at people with a baton. They let people kill somebody. Robert Bates, that was his name. He was an insurance company CEO, but he kept donating money and equipment to the police, so they let him be a reserve officer, and he'd ride around, and he went on a drug bust, I think, at some point, and he killed a suspect, and it turns out hadn't done anything, I think. But anyway, he killed Eric Harris, was the name of the victim here. And do you remember this story? He jumped out with the rest of the cops to like tackle him and bring him to the ground, and they were saying, he's resisting arrest. So Bates, pretending he's a cop, says that he was reaching for his taser, which why does he have a effing taser at all? But guess what? He didn't have, well, he had a taser, but he reached for and grabbed instead a gun. And he says, oh, I grabbed the wrong thing. And then he pressed it to Eric Harris and he shot him and he killed him. Now, he was actually held to account for that. He was actually convicted and I think sent to jail for that. As I recall, the sentence wasn't that harsh, but at least it was a trial and a sentence. But imagine that. He's carrying a gun and a taser and saying, I'm a police officer because I gave money to cops. And he shot and killed a suspect right there on the street in front of everybody. But they would never let, somebody just dress up and show up. I don't know whether the cops knew who that person was. I don't know whether the cops were conscious of the fact that he looked out of place or what. They seemed to agree that they didn't know who the hell the guy was. But if you don't think that they would let somebody dress up and swing a baton at people, I got news for you. They let them kill people for fun too. So that's all well within the realm of possibility. Just wanted to remind you of that and remind you of the name of the man who was killed, Eric Harris, though at least he got a small measure of justice for his family. Not the case for anybody else really out there, and that's why we have problems. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Net Roots Radio. Okay, maybe we'll get around to some of the other items of news. I just found that really fascinating. I've circulated again, just tweeted if you're listening to the show live, tweeted again the piece of footage here. Jason Patinkin is the guy who was circulating anyway. Was it his video? It looks like it. Anyway, he says, here's full footage of an encounter with unmarked individual who attacked me and a protester with his baton. Cops did not know who he was or even if he was a government official. As I go through more of my footage, if I find him again, I'll post it and I guess we could search around and see whether he had more, but it was a very good point. Can't tell who this guy is. He's not interested in identifying himself. And even the cops around him have no idea who he might be, and there's every reason to believe that he might have had zero authority to do any of those things. And, well, good on the protesters for calling him out and pointing it out, and I'm glad we know about it. And it's sad that it's happening, but I'm glad we know about it. All right, let's see. Shifting gears here, there's probably a lot just languishing in the timeline over at Twitter that we could be talking about, and maybe we'll run down some of that stuff. Just happened to see Daniel Dale tweet this out a few minutes ago, and it was of some interest. He says, you know how Trump keeps saying he was left 0 ventilators. I used to say, the stockpile, the national stockpile of ventilators was empty, and how Jared was saying along with all the PPE, we were going to rebuild our stockpile. Whatever happened with all of that, too? We should follow up on all of that stuff, because I do see stories about now that the outbreak is, basically out of control in Texas, and even Greg Abbott pretty much admitting, what did he say? His wording was that the situation is unacceptable because all their ICU beds are filling up in Dallas. I saw some Dallas nurses claiming that they were out of PPE and using crappy backup materials there in Dallas. But you remember that the ventilators was part of it. Daniel Dale saying, remember when he was saying he was left 0 ventilators? Factcheck.org got the first official numbers. There were 16,660 ventilators in the stockpile as of March, all left from previous administrations, of course, more than Trump has needed to deploy even at the highest levels of the pandemic in the early days. So there you have it. Trump inherited more ventilators than have been distributed, contrary to President Donald Trump's repeated claims that he inherited a strategic national stockpile with empty or bare cupboards. And it's funny, cupboards should probably be in scare quotes here because they don't actually have those there, but empty or bare are quoted instead. The federal government had more ventilators in stock than it ended up distributing among the COVID-19 pandemic, factcheck.org has learned. We're pointed here to the story as written by D'Angelo Gore. The SNS had 16,660 ventilators immediately available for use, like in working order and everything, I guess, when the federal government began deploying the breathing machines to states to treat critically ill COVID-19 patients in March. According to a Department of Health and Human Services spokesperson, none of those ventilators was bought by the Trump administration, the spokesperson told us. In a separate email to us on June 17th, another HHS spokesperson said the federal government had distributed 10,640 ventilators during the pandemic. Both HHS representatives said we could attribute their responses to an, quote, HHS spokesperson. So they did. That's a weird sentence, but okay. That affirms what we previously wrote in early May, that there were, quote, likely thousands, unquote, of ventilators in the federal stockpile of emergency medicines and equipment that Trump inherited from his predecessor. What we could not provide was the exact number until now. In defending his administration's response to the coronavirus pandemic, Trump has frequently made the false claim that when he took office, the SNS was bare or empty and lacked ventilators, which helped individuals, well, you know what they do. On April 30th, Trump falsely claimed we had a ventilator problem that was caused by the fact that we weren't left ventilators by a previous administration. You're not going to believe this. That was not true. But it took us, 2 months to figure that out. Most recently, at a June 18th roundtable with governors about reopening the U.S. small businesses, or reopening of U.S. small businesses, the president said, when we came here, you had very few ventilators in this country. And by the time we started, not one person that needed a ventilator didn't get it. So everybody that needed a ventilator got a ventilator. We stocked up those shelves. The cupboard was empty, and we filled up the cupboards. But remember, again, that's another one I guess we would add to the pile. This one is not so implausible as airplanes are invisible, windmills cause cancer. But just as implausibly, remember that he does claim and has said it several times, when I got in here, when I came to office, the army was out of bullets. He's the president. They say he's the president. And they say you should trust our system will work just fine to get rid of him because he's incompetent and murdering thousands and thousands of people. I'm just telling you, 1, you might not want to wait. 2, the system might not work. 3, why are you even why bother contesting a free and fair election even? As between somebody who says, my airplanes are invisible and the army's out of bullets. Who cares? I don't want to know what the American people think as to whether or not that guy should be the president. Enough. Get rid of him. Depose him. Put him in jail. Execute him for the murder of the thousands of Americans he's killed along the way. Be done with it. Finished. But let's continue with this article, shall we? In March, there was a concern. We'll just jump right back into it. about whether or not the country would have enough ventilators to meet the needs of the health crisis. You know all about that. New York was in trouble. Andrew Cuomo publicly asked the federal government for thousands more than it had provided, and Trump criticized Cuomo's handling of the pandemic. And there was room for that, just not the way he did it. Vice President Mike Pence appeared to recently acknowledge that the Trump administration inherited ventilators. In a June 16th op-ed, Pence wrote that the SNS had been refilled since the H1N1 influenza outbreak of 2009, and it had only 10,000 ventilators on hand in March. It's true that the SNS, which holds a variety of medical supplies that states can request to use during a public health crisis, was not fully replenished after millions of N95 respirators, masks, gloves, and other protective items were distributed during that 2009 pandemic, but there were even more ventilators available in March than Pence said. There's an email to factcheck.org in which an HHS spokesperson told them about the facts. It's here. You've got the facts by now. Importantly, the spokesperson added, the stock of 16,660 ventilators did not include any acquired during, or rather by, the current administration. We also know now that the SNS had more ventilators in March than it ended up distributing amid the current pandemic. Another email outlines that. And it goes on to say at least 7,920 of those 10,000 plus ventilators that were deployed went out by April 6th, according to an HHS document released that month by the House Committee on Oversight and Reform. That was before April 8th when HHS announced the first of 9 different contracts for companies such as General Motors and General Electric to produce new ventilators under the Defense Production Act. So it was all done by the time they actually got around to doing that. The White House announced on April 2nd that Trump was invoking that law to increase output of the life-saving devices. HHS told us those contracts are expected to produce more than 180,000 ventilators to be added to the stockpile. That is an awful lot. That does not include additional ventilators that states purchased directly from private companies when states couldn't get the number of machines they expected to need from the federal supply. The SNS currently has approximately 24,000 ventilators available for deployment, an HHS spokesperson said. And that's not even including the Russian ones that explode. So that's good news. I mean, I'm glad we don't include those. We shouldn't. They explode. So don't do it. All right, let's see. Many other things happening out there that we probably ought to pay some attention to. Oh, I see that Mark Knoller has noted for us that Vice President Pence was, I guess, caught on camera, stumbling while climbing the steps to board Air Force Two, but quickly stood up and waved and appeared unhurt. Not really too concerned about what happens to Mike Pence, but just sort of a tease of a story, since I've been hoping against hope for some time that Donald Trump would meet his end stumbling on the steps of Air Force One. But you see, this is Air Force Two. So totally different and just inapplicable to the current situation. Let's see. There's more. Oh, yes. I happened to see this morning. I'm just going to give you my whole Twitter feed at this point. Speaking of the protests in Lafayette Square Park, Glenn Kirshner tweeting here that I guess Trump was reported by MSNBC to have authorized the arrest. It says here, President Trump tweets that he has authorized the arrest of anyone who vandalizes or destroys any monument on U.S. federal property. This comes hours after protesters attempted to pull down a statue of President Andrew Jackson near the White House. And Glenn Kirshner helpfully pointing out for his employers, he works at MSNBC and NBC as well as a legal analyst, saying a president doesn't authorize arrests. Of course, knowing how to president is not really Donald Trump's thing. Quite true. But once again, just another one of those examples where you headline writers and people of the press could benefit from this. Remember that this is where purportedly, or purports to, Trump purports to authorize arrests would save you. If you don't know exactly what's going on, or particularly if you suspect that maybe he's overstepping his boundaries or whatever, but you should always keep in mind my admonishment that he's not actually ever doing anything in the sense that he's completing the paperwork and making something happen the way an executive should. He's just saying, I wish this was happening. And so, you can always save yourself the trouble by saying Trump purports to authorize those arrests. You won't be wrong. You won't have to correct anything. And most importantly, the people who read that headline will immediately be struck by the possibility that Trump is full of it and is lying. I wish, that the press was comfortable saying Trump lies, that he's authorizing arrests. Presidents don't do that. He doesn't know that, and he hopes you don't know that. But you can't fit all of that in a headline probably, and they're going to be cautious about such things. But it's a very strong hint. If your headline says Trump purports to authorize arrests, people are going to know what's going on, and they won't even really have to do any further research. If they're very thorough people, they'll look into it and find out, yeah, that's right, presidents don't authorize arrests. But if they're just regular skimmers, they will say, oh, there goes Trump again, pretending he has powers that he doesn't. And your ends will have been accomplished, and you will have done it accurately, and there will be no legitimate complaint against you that can be lodged by the administration. Not that they won't lodge it anyway, it just won't be legitimate, and everyone will know it. Okay. Other things that happened over the past couple of days that maybe we should think about doing something about. Maybe I'll discuss this one. Yeah, perhaps this one we'll save for discussion with Joan McCarter if she can make her way here during the second half of the show. But probably want to talk a little bit about what Jerry Nadler may or may not be contemplating doing with his Judiciary Committee there in the House. Let's see. Other things that I saw. Oh, yes. Right. Oh, no, that was about the Martha McSally $4,000 vacation tax credit. I think we may be done with what happened in the immediate last couple of hours before the show in the Twitter stream. Other fun coronavirus stories to share with you. We'll just do this quick hit that I saw in Raw Story, which means I'll open a Raw Story page, which means, maybe my computer will go to sleep. I have no idea. But this one, here's where Raw Story really comes in super handy. The original reporting on this, I know sometimes I'm a little skeptical of the way some outlets that are aggregators chiefly, not just Raw Story, plenty of others, TPM, same thing, where they just aggregate the stories from elsewhere. But here they've done us a real favor. I tried clicking through to the original source at the Oregonian, but it is an exclusive story, as they call it. And at the Oregonian, exclusives mean you got to pay to see it. Like, we're excluding you from seeing it unless you pay us. That kind of exclusive. Anyway, Raw Story has done us all the favor of paying our subscription for us, I guess, with the Oregonian. Poor guys. Anyway, on Monday, they tell us, the Oregonian reported that the Lighthouse Pentecostal Church in Union County, Oregon, is tied to 236 cases of COVID-19 in the area. By the way, the county has a total of 258 cases. 236 are from this church. I don't know whether this picture was taken in a church. The people appear to be having a fantastic time, reveling in what I suppose is the Holy Spirit in some fashion. But they're sick now. And maybe God will save them. That would be nice if they could arrange for that. But it goes on to say that the president's push to reopen churches was cited as the reason why Lighthouse chose to ignore public health directives. In a May 22nd Instagram post, Lighthouse Pentecostal Church said it would begin in-person services Memorial Day weekend in accordance, and that's a quote, in accordance with President Donald Trump's demands that states allow churches to open. Well, once again, that would have been helped perhaps with a purported demand, right? Trump purportedly demands this. Now, you don't need to show any paperwork to demand something. That's true. But I always say purported always works here, right? Because I don't know that he demanded it at all. I didn't see the comment, so I'm not sure. And sometimes it is said that the president says things and then the president denies having said them later on. Or sometimes we videotape the president saying something and the president denies saying it later on anyway. And so, well, it's only purportedly the case that he said it. After all, it's being disputed. You can even use it as a defense, right? That's why you should be using the purportedly words all the time. Well, anyway, he says, or the church says that Trump demanded that states allow churches to open, and that was enough for them. That according to Selena Tibor, who wrote the article for the Oregonian, very politely note for us here in the Raw Story write-up of it. It's very nice. At the time, Union County was still in phase 1 of reopening, in which religious groups were not allowed to convene in large groups. The governor allowed faith groups to meet in gatherings of 25 people if congregants stayed a certain distance apart, and I guess they just ignored that and they went ahead and did the thing. A Facebook video uploaded on May 24th by the church showed hundreds of worshipers in the church dancing, singing, and moving around in close proximity. The video was later deleted, and some of those people might actually be later deleted as well, unfortunately, because, in some cases this is a deadly disease. Earlier in the same day that Lighthouse made its announcement, Trump had proclaimed that churches should be considered an essential business. Governors need to do the right thing and allow these very important essential places of faith to open right now for this weekend, he said, threatening to, and here's more purported stuff, threatening to override any governors who do not allow churches to resume normal services. Now, they could have been a little more patient at this church, at Lighthouse, but he did say right now this weekend, and I'll override them. And the church appears to be either full of people stupid enough to believe that he could demand such things and make them happen and would actually sign the paperwork that could do something about it, except there wasn't any paperwork that could do anything about it. There's no overriding the governors about anything. But I suspect they were ready to open anyway, and they were just looking for any excuse, but maybe they really did do it at the president's behest. Anyway, it makes no difference, I don't think, to the virus. The virus has found a welcoming home at Lighthouse Pentecostal Church, just like they said. Now, when they say that they want to welcome people in, they mean people, the hosts, as you might term it, for the virus. They were very interested in matching people with the virus at that point. And the doors were thrown open, and everyone was welcomed in the spirit of I don't know what. And all right, so they've found a new home for 236 viral loads. And congratulations to the people of the Lighthouse Pentecostal Church. It's have you heard the good news? They're all sick. It's not good news, but, whatever. It's God's will, so how bad could it be? Brad Parscale appears to finally be in trouble. Let's see, it's reported in a couple of places. I did see a diary on the front page of Daily Kos yesterday, hinting that he may finally be on the way out. And let's see, they were citing, I think, linking to a Yahoo News report, Tulsa rally failure may spark Trump campaign team shakeup, which is a gentle way of saying Brad Parscale is going to be fired. Less gentle over at Vanity Fair, where Gabriel Sherman, a favorite of ours on the show, says in his headline, oops, hold on, it's been replaced by a White Claw alcoholic seltzer pop-up ad. Let's get some of that. Brad really, S-word, it's S-T. In case you were wondering exactly which word it was, it's the S-T word. Brad really will say, crap the bed Saturday night. After Tulsa catastrophe, Parscale and Kushner should be R, I guess, if there's two of them, at the top of Trump's hit list. Read that carefully. Trump 'S hit list. Get it? That's funny. Well done there by the folks at Vanity Fair. Trump is pondering putting Kushner antagonists atop the campaign. With a quote here from somewhere, "We can't allow Jared's stupid disagreements to get in the way," he said. Who said? I don't know. But the problem is likely at the top. Yes, the dotard at the top. Gabriel Sherman put this together for us yesterday, exclusively for us. If you're not listening to the show, you're not allowed to read it. Donald Trump's exhausted trudge from Marine One toward the White House after his botched rally in Tulsa. Red tie undone, a grim look on his face, a crumpled MAGA hat in his hand, and I saw via Twitter yesterday dirty, smudged, sweaty streaks of orange makeup inside of his white collared shirt. I guess that's why he never undoes his tie around people after a rally like that, but we got to see it. Well, now it's an iconic image of his presidency. And as always with Trump, he's already looking for someone to blame. The most obvious candidate, according to sources, is embattled campaign manager Brad Parscale. Brad really crapped the bed, in colorful language here. It's funny, they print the word here, but in the headline you're not allowed to do it, maybe, or something, or they decided not to. I've seen such decisions made before. I think you're not supposed to do that in the headlines over at Daily Kos. But anyway, I can understand that. After all, I self-censor all the time. Brad really crapped the bed Saturday night. You have to remember, execution is 95% of presidential politics. That's not the way they mean it. I know that we got excited based on what we said at the beginning of the show. I think an execution should be 95% of this next go-round of presidential politics, but I think I'm in the minority still there, but I'm looking to normalize that view out there. I did it once with impeachment. Can't we do it again with the execution of Donald Trump? It might be a long shot. A lot of people are going to wring their hands about that one. You know how we are. Anyway, Brad crapped the bed. Got to remember, execution is 95% of presidential politics. A Republican close to the White House told me, Gabriel Sherman, that's me, over the weekend, Pascal committed a cascade of errors, from overhyping expected turnout to blaming the half-filled arena on protesters. Trump was so furious when he saw how thin the crowd was that he threatened not to go on stage. Or threatened to not go on stage. A little more stilted, but I think probably more accurate. Two sources briefed on the discussion told me, Gabriel Sherman, hi. The sources said that Pascal, reading the tea leaves, is planning to step down. He knows he can't survive, one source told me. No, wait for the paperwork, Brad. This is hilarious, too. Another source for this is Jason Miller, who is alive, for one thing. Happy Father's Day, Jason. And two, a senior advisor to the Trump campaign. Well, he says Pascal is safe because he's a very trustworthy guy, Jason Miller. You all remember why I say Happy Father's Day to him, right? He's the guy who got, what was the name of the other campaign operative? Was it Delgado? AJ Delgado? Is that the woman who was working on? Do I have it wrong? I hope I haven't named the wrong person. He got her pregnant right in the middle of the Family Values campaign. And then took off on her. First of all, offering to pay for an abortion for her during his big pro-life campaign. And then he also, I think he also got a stripper pregnant at the same time, which is amazing. Very busy guy, and I don't know how he has time to figure out that Brad Pascal is safe. But maybe he has no real idea because he's off, screwing strippers all the time. And I don't know. They called me for comments, so I said Brad, safe. Brad is the campaign manager, and he's the one in charge, Miller said. We'll see whether that statement remains operative after he impregnates another stripper. Hold on after these messages. One thing, though, is for sure, the blame game has shifted into high gear. Trump insiders told me Trump was presented with 5 options of where to hold his rally. The president chose Tulsa, a source said. Why? What were the other choices? I don't know. Strip clubs where I can impregnate the dancers. Yeah, it's an idea. I'm surprised he didn't go with that option. But sources also told me, Gabriel Sherman, that if Pascal is forced out, he likely won't be the only casualty of the rally fiasco. Trump is debating revoking his son-in-law Jared Kushner's control over the campaign. Sources said that would be fun and exciting. As I previously reported, me, Gabriel Sherman, Trump has been frustrated with Kushner's oversight of the campaign in light of the polling that consistently shows Trump losing to Joe Biden. That would be upsetting. Another source of friction has been campaign spending and reports Trump has gotten that Pascal is making millions of dollars. Did Jared allow this? Trump asked advisors recently. According to a source, Kushner declined to comment. One way to measure Kushner's diminished influence will be found in whom Trump would choose to replace Pascal. And, okay, that would be a measure. Top candidates include 2016 veterans Miller. Now you know. All right, now you know the source. Well, that's why Jason Miller's saying, no, Brad Pascal is safe. I can't be seen to be pushing him out because I'm usually being seen pushing my way in to people that I'm impregnating. But whatever, he can't really be seen as the guy stabbing him in the back if he hopes to inherit the job. So whatever. I mean, that seems pretty obvious to me, but okay. So among the top candidates, Miller, David Bossie, and Corey Lewandowski. Bossy and Lewandowski, though, very, very busy on the Council of Presidential Scholars, or whatever the fake-ass job it was that they were appointed to recently, all of whom Kushner successfully kept on the outer fringe of Trump world. We can't allow Jared's stupid disagreements to get in the way, Trump recently told advisors, according to a source briefed on the conversation. So I guess Jared's stupid disagreements with Bossy, Lewandowski, and I guess maybe Miller, don't allow that to get in the way. Let's put Mr. Pregnancy Guy in charge, or maybe one of the other two idiots. Other Trump insiders are skeptical that Lewandowski would be put in charge of such a vast operation, like he was last time. Corey was great when it was just Trump and an airplane, but let's face it, he couldn't manage a 7-Eleven, a person close to Trump said. That sounds like maybe that's Miller angling for the job, after all. The serious operation will be run by serious people who seriously impregnate multiple people during the course of a short campaign. The Tulsa debacle takes on added resonance, given that a return to rallies is central to Trump's re-election strategy. With COVID cases spiking across Trump country, it's unlikely that Trump will be able to pack an arena anytime soon, if that was the reason. Deprived of the oxygen his legions of fans provide, themselves deprived of oxygen by COVID-19, Trump is struggling to fight political wars on multiple fronts. He's also lost the attack line that Biden is too old for the job. There's something off about Trump, a West Wing official told a top Republican a few days after Trump shakily descended the ramp at West Point. He doesn't have the stamina, as he likes to say. But Miller said the campaign is actively planning for another rally. Yay. We are eager to get President Trump back out on the road and again in front of voters. The energy and enthusiasm is all with Trump. All 6,000 people providing all of the enthusiasms of that last rally. Okay. Time coming up here for our second break, bringing us into the second hour. I guess we probably have another segment or so. I don't know what... Joan has sent us a direct message on Twitter. So let me start up the direct message music. Aha! And bad news, everybody. Joan says, I'm allowed to tell her, everybody. I have to break the news to you. Not going to be able to make it today. Got to take care of some business at home. We'll leave that, off the air for the moment anyway. No, not a huge emergency. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be okay. But just some things you got to take care of at home. Sorry, Joan. Okay. Hope everything goes well. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right. Well, was the mute button on the microphone not working, or was the microphone unmuted the whole time? We'll never know, because if everything's working well, you were listening to some enjoyable break music instead of me having the discussion in the background. I'm going to risk it all. We're going to roll the dice. I know a lot of you are probably curious about what's going on. Now I've worried you about Joan by saying, don't worry, don't panic. It's just a huge emergency that isn't really a huge emergency. I think I'll violate, I was checking with the lawyers. Does it violate HIPAA for us to talk about the fact that she's got to take a dog to the vet? No, right? It doesn't apply to the dogs, does it? So just like HIPAA doesn't apply to supermarkets, if you have one of those fake-ass cards that you printed off of the PDF on the internet that says you don't have to wear a mask, there is no HIPAA violation here by saying, a dog has to go to the vet, and Joan's the one who has to take it. So, okay, we'll move on with that one. I think, I suppose, the dog could have a beef with us. And we'll hear it from Abby probably tomorrow when Greg joins us. But we're risk takers here on this show. So we're gonna tell you, just so that everybody is at ease here. Nothing wrong with the people in the Joan circle. It's the dogs, and it might not even be anything major. It could be just a routine trip to the vet. But that's what's come up, and nobody else is available to drive to the vet. So there you go. We're regular people here on the show. That gives us, we'll take it. It gives us more time to discuss some other things. I guess we'll get around now to the, my word. All right, I got to set that one aside for something else. We'll get around now to the story perhaps that I was saving for possible discussion with Joe, now that we're done with the story of Brad Parscale and what it was that he left in the bed on Saturday night. And we can get around to this one. I had mentioned, oh yes, that was over in the Twitter feed, that widespread, let's say, dissatisfaction. I think we just mentioned it with Greg yesterday too, with the way Jerry Nadler and maybe Nancy Pelosi have come to the conclusion. It's not hard to believe that Pelosi might also come to the same conclusion. She's hinted at it before. With respect to Trump's first impeachment. There was that time when Trump wasn't worth the impeachment, and then she ended up changing her mind. The question of whether or not Bill Barr merits impeachment. He does, of course, but we've heard from Jerry Nadler anyway that he doesn't think it's worth the time and effort because, of course, the Republican Senate would never vote to convict him. Although I have seen somebody float the idea that, it's not, this is really interesting, it's not worth the time and effort because it might backfire on us. They might, in fact, vote to convict and remove him, having been given the go-ahead by, presumably, Mitch McConnell, so that it would set them up prior to the election to look like they were, in fact, strong and independent of Donald Trump and were willing to stand up to some of his more egregious abuses, and so therefore everyone would then come flocking back to the Republican Party. I don't know whether I buy that as a real prospect, either that McConnell would release people to do that, or that people would do it anyway, or that people would buy into the idea that they're independent because they impeached Barr or what. But you know what? I'll take it. Fantastic. Let's roll the dice. I'll take that one. I say, as I've said for quite some time, I'd be impeaching people left and right. The fact that you actually have a valid case against Barr is just a bonus in my view. The impeachment is one of the few things available to a Democratic House that will allow them to control the agenda of a Republican Senate. And Republicans want nothing more right now than to use what remaining time they have to confirm as many insane and unqualified whack job right-wing Republican judges to the federal bench as possible. To the extent that they are even dispensing summarily with impeachments, they are unable to be confirming Republican judges at that moment. And I am perfectly happy to occupy as much of their time as possible with that task. Even voting to summarily dismiss the charges will keep them briefly off of their ability to be using the time for confirming judges. And if they wanted to do things that way, I'd be happy to oblige and send them literally hundreds of thousands of impeachments, one after the other. And I suppose they could try and dismiss them en bloc. But then that too, I'd love to see that, quite honestly. If we're sending serious impeachments that are grounded in reality, as they would be both with Barr and, for that matter, Trump again, even on the same charges, quite honestly. We didn't get a full hearing of the Ukraine charges the first time. Not that I thought they were the most important of the bunch, but I'd send that again and over again. And if Republicans are going to say we feel that our strongest case for re-election is that we summarily dismiss valid impeachment complaints, let's have that election. Not that I think it'll be freely and fairly contested, but let's have it. If we're going to have one, or we're going to pretend think we're going to have one, let's have that one. Honestly, I wouldn't mind it at all. They should bring it on. All right, let's see. What else is in pocket that I can share with you? Many of them, many stories here that merit some attention. Let's see what's going on here. Yes, there was another unusual happening at the White House last night related to the activities in Lafayette Square Park. CNN reporting this one. All this also reflected in a front page or a recommended list diary from last night, as I recall. But I don't know. I don't know if it's still up on the page. Anyway, the CNN report on it. Clash near White House. That would be Lafayette Square Park. prompts Secret Service, that would be the people who guard the president, I'm going to do a Vox explainer of this headline, prompts the Secret Service to tell the press, that would be the media, to leave the grounds of the White House in unusual move. That really ruined the headline, right? Clash near White House prompts Secret Service to tell press to leave grounds in unusual move. Now that makes sense. Read it all together, right? A confrontation between protesters and police in the park across the street from the White House, Lafayette Square Park, on Monday evening, led the U.S. Secret Service to take the unusual step of ordering members of the White House press corps to immediately leave the grounds of the White House, not the park, you see? It is unusual, and it's really hard to explain. At one point, protesters in Lafayette Square tried to bring down a statue of former President Andrew Jackson that stands in the middle of the park, where you would think Lafayette would be, in the middle of the park before they were driven back by police officers. The square has been the site of largely peaceful protests that have been ongoing following the death of George Floyd at the hands of police officers. The Washington Post reported that the U.S. Park Police clashed with the protesters and used pepper spray as part of their attempts to push them back. Some protesters responded by throwing objects at the police officers, the paper reported. The incident was apparently touched off by a police effort to clear tents out of a nearby street. Alexandria Picavet, I don't know how to, Picavet, Picavet, I wonder. Well, Alexandra had this to say. She's a spokeswoman for the National Park Service, the jurisdiction of the, or under the jurisdiction of the National Park Service are the U.S. Park Police, who worked with local police officers and the Secret Service to, quote, prevent the destruction of the Andrew Jackson statue in Lafayette Park, unquote, and said the park was temporarily closed. She did not provide additional details about the police response, and CNN has reached out to the Metropolitan Police Department because they haven't heard anything about it. Protesters also spray-painted BHAZ on the pillars of St. John's Episcopal Church, which sits across the street from Lafayette Square. Of course, that's where Trump headed to hold up the Bible and say, it's a Bible, and then walk home. The acronym apparently stands for Black House, like White House, Black House Autonomous Zone, an apparent reference to the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, CHAZ, in Seattle, where protesters have taken over a 6-square block area of the city and kept out police in order to set up their own self-governing space. It's actually quite interesting. The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone has been a relatively peaceful protest, or had been, until this past weekend, when dramatic music was played, and when 2 men were shot in the zone early Saturday morning, and one of them later died. So yes, some serious happenings there, although no clear indication as yet, certainly not in this article, as to what actually happened there. But you know, people get shot and die all the time, and it's just like the flu. Quite honestly, I mean, it's a sad thing to have happen, but I'm sure that people are pointing to it and saying, see, no police, people get shot and died. Well, guess what? Hundreds, thousands of people get shot and die all the time, all over non-autonomous zones as well, and sometimes the police are the ones who shot them. Several journalists, including 2 CNN employees, were told they had to leave the White House immediately via the south side of the complex, which is not the normal entrance or exit for the press. Typically, in security situations at the White House, the press corps is locked down inside the complex. On Monday evening, in response to an increasingly violent demonstration in Lafayette Park, 4 members of the media were misdirected by the Secret Service to leave the White House grounds. Misdirected. The members of the press were rerouted to exits on the south side of the complex for their own safety, a Secret Service spokesperson told CNN. That actually doesn't clear up anything by saying they were misdirected by the Secret Service to leave the White House. Is that a mistake? You mean we didn't mean to tell them, or they weren't supposed to tell them that, or they're not authorized to tell them that, or that's not procedure if they even think there's danger? I don't know. That's it for that section. It goes on now to the section that says Trump again threatens protesters. Might as well update ourselves on that one. I think that's just more detail about what we heard earlier. St. John's Church was the site, of course, of Trump's controversial photo op earlier this month, when authorities forcefully removed protesters from Lafayette Square to clear a path for Trump to momentarily stand in front of the historic church and hold a Bible. So, well, It's well put there. It's very, it diminishes the event properly. Trump has pointed to isolated incidents of violence and looting that have occasionally accompanied the Floyd protests to proclaim himself your president of law and order. That's a quote. In case you were wondering, that's awfully dumb sounding. It's because it's a direct quote. And he employed similarly tough rhetoric in response to Monday night's tensions, threatening protesters with up to 10 years in prison under federal law for vandalizing federal monuments. I don't know whether that's like something you can actually get and he heard about it or looked it up or had someone tell him and he just relayed that information, or whether he was just making it up. I'll put you in prison for 10 years because that's what I say you should get. I authorize your arrest, right? The president continued to seize on the incident Tuesday morning, threatening, quote, serious force against protesters if an autonomous zone is created in D.C. In the nation's capital, tensions between groups of protesters and law enforcement outside the White House have been a focal point for the nation in recent weeks as protests continue to play out over the killing of Floyd, a black man who died while in police custody in Minneapolis last month, in case you didn't know. A lot of time gets spent on reminders of that. Okay, and then some a recapping of the various activities with respect to Confederate and other similar statues around the country, and that's really basically it for the CNN report. Let's jump back in there. I have here, I wonder, is there any more news in this one? I have the Twitter thread of Stephen Dennis, the Bloomberg News reporter who covers the Senate anyway. If I don't know, for some reason he says, I talk to U.S. senators in hallways for his work, but does he not cover the House as well? I'm not really sure. Anyway, congressional reporter now for Bloomberg, previously with CQ and Roll Call. Anyway, he broke the story, as far as I know, on Martha McSally's stupid vacation giveaway. That sounds like a great, like a game show. Martha McSally's stupid vacation giveaway. Not one I would watch, but anyway, yeah. Is there more? Here's the details. Anyway, I'll give you. I think it's a relatively short thread. Just thought I would share it with you, just in case you were wondering. Exactly, Dave. Exactly how dumb is this thing? Well, it's approximately this dumb. A day ahead of Trump's visit to Arizona. Right, that's coming next. GOP Senator Martha McSally proposes giving taxpayers $4,000 each to take a vacation. I say $4,000 each because it's enclosed here in asterisks. So I think that's the tone of voice you're supposed to give that when you read it aloud. Couples would get $8,000 in vacation tax credits plus $500 per kid. Okay. McSally's massive travel stimulus bill would require the travel to be within the United States, but at least 50 miles from your principal residence. Interesting. You could use the money on travel to your vacation home, but not for vacation home lodging expenses. What? Does that mean you could go to your own vacation home and use the money on travel for that? You got to go 50 miles, but so you could fly by Concorde to your own vacation home, but not for vacation home lodging expenses? You mean like if you rent somebody else's vacation home, that it can't be used for? That's what most people think of as a vacation. That's bizarre. So you're only allowed to go on vacation and claim the credit if you are rich enough to say you're actually only going to one of your own homes. Okay, I don't know. Who knows? I haven't seen the legislative language, and I don't ever want to. This is bizarre. The bill, quote, will encourage Americans to safely get out of their homes and discover or rediscover Arizona, along with the rest of the amazing destinations our country has to offer after a difficult several months stuck inside, McSally said. You're very dumb, I said about McSally. The bill would pay for your food, beverages, lodging, and yet we just heard that it wouldn't, transportation, and live entertainment events, including sporting events. Maybe my second reading on this is maybe you could pay for your travel if you're going to your own vacation home, but you can't pay yourself for renting your own vacation home for yourself. I don't know what this is. Maybe that's not any more sensible a reading than anything else. All right, but it says down here, food, beverages, lodging. There it is. Transportation and live entertainment events, including sporting events, if any. Note, were you to win a $4,000 vacay on, say, The Price is Right, if they were having The Price is Right, which they're not, but if you were to do that, you would have to pay taxes on it, so this is actually a better deal. Interesting way of putting things. It's always, the Price is Right test is always a great test to see whether you're establishing sound taxation policy, I guess. Just some very rough arithmetic off the top of my head, Stephen says, but if 100 million taxpayers took advantage of the $4,000 tax break, that'd be $400 billion. And I think that many more would want to do so. I mean, who would want to turn down a free all-expense paid vacation? No one would want to. However, it does, I've seen pointed out elsewhere, this is a non-refundable tax credit. I don't know that 100 million taxpayers have the ability to lay out $4,000 per person, per adult, and $500 per kid, and then wait until this time next year to take it off of their taxes for next year. And I don't know what anybody's going to owe in terms of taxes next year anyway, given what's happened to the economy this time around. But okay, not getting into the non-refundable section or discussion of it until later in this tweet thread. But who would want to turn down a free all-expense paid vacation? Somebody who recognizes that it's not all expenses paid. Will reimburse you maybe in the form of tax credits next year. But okay, so I don't think you're going to reach the $400 billion mark on this one. I don't think you're going to reach the $1 mark on this one because I'm imagining this bill is DOA. Anyway, the bill doesn't include an offset, which, as you know, means it can't possibly be a Republican bill. So it would swell the deficit. I wonder what a dynamic score might look like, though. It's an interesting thought. Also, the tax credit isn't refundable, he now acknowledges. So if you don't make enough money to pay federal income taxes, you don't get the free vacation either, right? It's called the American Trip Act. How do you like that? American, ready for the trip? It's an acronym. So we'll give it a bananas evaluation. You remember the bananas was the what was it? The I can't even remember my own acronym for this thing, but my own acronym for the acronym scoring scale. What was the B for? I can't even remember. It's been so long since we used it. It should be bipartisan, perhaps, but really I don't think it was. But the acronym naming assessment scale, right? Bananas, something I can't remember. Anyway, the American Trip Act is the American Tax Rebate and Incentive Program Act. American TRIP, or really TRAPE, if you include the A. American Tax Rebate and Incentive Program Act, as in take a trip. Get it? Stephen winds up by saying, I find it interesting that Andrew Yang retweeted this thread. The program would end December 31st, 2021, and would be retroactive, amazingly, to January 1st, 2020. So I think that means you'd get 2 years of $4,000 tax credits. Wow. Trump in May talked up the idea of an Explore America tax credit, which McSally's bill resembles. Oh my God, it might find some life, you mean? As a boon to the hard-hit restaurant industry. The U.S. Travel Association has been lobbying for a $4,000 tax credit. Oh my God. So there's a real movement behind this. Orlando Sentinel had this report last week. Under the headline, tourism businesses want taxpayers to pay people to travel. The exact opposite of how you might actually mitigate a pandemic. So there you have it. There are really other people besides dumb old Martha McSally out there saying that this thing should happen. It should not. Give people $4,000 and let them spend it on restaurants near their homes for takeout food if you want. I'm just sort of I don't know. I'm aghast. Am I aghast here? Somebody check this out. $1,200 was what they were offering before for everything that you would need for 3 months plus of quarantine. And now $4,000 to just F off around the country if you want. All right. That's planning. More news that you can use to, drive you to despair. We found out last week, right when they said that they had been poisoned by Shake Shack milkshakes in New York, that the police had been poisoned. Really, right away, we knew that the police had not been poisoned at all by Shake Shack or anyone else. But now the jig is up. The story is out there. The New York Post tells all about how this thing came together. You remember the story? A couple of cops said they went to Shake Shack, tasted something funny in their shakes, and accused the Shake Shack employees of poisoning them. And then from there, the police unions and others took off and ran with the story. The cops are puking their guts out. They're in the hospital. How dare you? Why can't you just give people a break? All of this, by the way, I think led directly, though I can't prove it. Maybe the woman never saw it, but I think led directly to that woman cop, like the next day or so, recording herself freaking out in her car because her Egg McMuffin was late at the McDonald's drive-thru, right? That she was so afraid to eat it now because, of course, the fact that they hadn't made it in front of her very eyes, which they never do even if they make it instantaneously when you drive up, the whole thing was baseless and stupid, but she was afraid she was being poisoned. They're taking their sweet time making my Egg McMuffin because it's really a Death McMuffin. And you know how long those take. You can't make them as fast as, say, water boils into a grit, right? So, I don't know. My thinking on all of this, by the way, look, long story short on the Shake Shack thing, no, nobody poisoned anything. They found out first that maybe some cleaning fluid that they used in cleaning the shake machine didn't get thoroughly rinsed off of the shake machine before they made the next bunch of shakes. But there's even more reason to believe that the whole story is stupid, and it's all reported by the New York Post. But now, before I even get into that, let me just say, if you're listening, lady cop, whoever you were, I would consider suing the New York City Police Department and their unions for the emotional distress you suffered. You needlessly worried about being poisoned with a Death McMuffin because these guys made up the story about the shakes. As it turns out, nobody got sick at anything. Nobody went to I don't know whether they went to the hospital to get checked, but they were suffering no symptoms. So just some cop on social media or through the press releases just winging it, saying that the cops were vomiting from all of this. The New York Post has some more backstory here. How conspiracy theories about the New York Police Department Shake Shack, quote, poisoning blew up. So let's see if we can't figure out a little bit of what's been happening here. The 3 cops, not 6, as somebody once said, at the center of the New York Police Department milkshake, quote, poisoning scandal never even got sick. And there wasn't the slightest whiff of criminality from the get-go. But that didn't stop gung-ho brass from rolling out the crime scene tape and unions from dishing out empty conspiracy theories, the Post has learned. Specifically, who learned it at the Post? Craig McCarthy. They all learned it. Craig's the one telling us. The fullest picture yet to emerge of the incident, which came amid fraught tensions between the police and public, is based on records and multiple interviews with police sources. The 3 officers were down from the Bronx on protest duty in Lower Manhattan on June 15th when they ordered the now infamous mid-shift treats via a mobile app around 7:30 p.m., purchasing 3 shakes across 2 separate orders, sources said. That means one of the orders was for one shake, oh death, as they would have it. But again, take note here, they ordered via a mobile app. The people at Shake Shack never knew that they were making milkshakes for cops from the beginning. Just like that story about the police who said, I went to Starbucks and I ordered coffee for everybody just to say thank you for being a police officer or a dispatcher or whatever the hell the story was. And they wrote pig on my cup, right? Or they said the order was for pig. that they had written that on the ticket, or that they had typed it into the machines which had printed the ticket. And then we found out, no, they ordered on a mobile app. And guess what? The mobile app, one, means that they didn't know they were preparing coffee for police officers or personnel. And two, the app tells you put your name in, and they put pig in themselves so that they could have a story about this. Same thing here with the milkshakes, though they went without labeling themselves pigs. A mobile app order means the people making the shakes don't have any idea who's coming to pick them up. Their drinks were waiting for them when they arrived at the Shake Shack on the second floor of the 200 Broadway. A few minutes later, a female officer picked up her strawberry shake from the front counter, and her two male colleagues grabbed their cherry and vanilla drinks from the side counter, sources said. Very important information. Thank you, New York Post. A little bit more on this when we come back. Moron. That's funny. Good. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Networks Radio. So we continue on. When we last left our, I don't know, whatever they are, our protagonists, anyway, our anti-heroes, certainly, they were picking up a strawberry, cherry, and vanilla milkshake, respectively, from Shake Shack at 200 Broadway. In case you want to try and reenact some of this, you now have all of the facts you need. And quite honestly, there's not a shake among them that I would have drank, regardless of what else was in it. To be honest, perhaps the vanilla if you malted it, but strawberry, vanilla, and cherry. You're welcome to it. I probably would have vomited, whether there was cleaning chemical in there or not. Anyway, police sources, you understand, well, wait a second. Did we skip something here? No, all right. Police sources, we're in the right place, explained it was clear that the workers couldn't have known cops had placed the orders since it wasn't done in person. And they couldn't have dosed the drinks after the officers arrived because they were packaged and waiting for pickup when the trio walked in. You dummies. I added that part. Soon after sipping the shakes, however, it's getting dangerous, the cops realized they didn't taste or smell right. They were vanilla, strawberry, and cherry. That's why. I hope I'm not insulting millions of you out there who love cherry shakes, but anyway, maybe they're great. They're just, I don't know what to tell you. Well, anyway, they didn't smell or taste right, so they threw the drinks in the trash and alerted a manager who apologized and issued them vouchers for free food or drink, which they accepted. Aha! According to sources. They accepted them. Well, there you have it. So, but when the cops told their sergeant about the incident, and why would you do something like that? What official police business, Sarge? My cherry milkshake didn't taste good, and they gave me coupons for free stuff. What do you think of that? I don't know. I think we should put out, let's go get him, boy. I mean, it's like the cop from The Simpsons here. All right, well, let's go get him. You know, let's put out an APB, alert the FBI, give me some other, letters to call out, and we'll go do that. 10-4, whatever. I don't know. Give me some jargon, right? The perpetrator stepped out his vehicle and gave me free coupons for, So imagine reporting this to your sergeant. And then the sergeant says, we got to do something about it. Wow. So when they reported they told their sergeant about the incident in which they said, I don't like this milkshake. Let's throw it out and ask for free crap. And they gave it to us, too. Wow. Boy, do they hate cops over there. The supervisor then, after that, calls in the emergency service unit to set up a crime scene at the fast food joint for an evidence search around 9:20 p.m., nearly 2 hours after they first got the sour shakes, which sounds like something that you would get after drinking like bad tequila or something, but all right. The three were rushed to Bellevue Hospital. They were rushed there 2 hours later. I mean, there's still a lot wrong with this story in which they're trying to clean this up, right? One, why do you tell your sergeant? Two, why does the sergeant tell a supervisor? Three, why does the supervisor say, I'm going to dispatch like official resources here, the emergency service unit, to set up a crime scene? What's missing here is, how does it go from, I just came from Shake Shack, and boy, is my, tongue upset. I don't know what that, and then it goes to, what we need to do is dispatch official resources here. Who says, first of all, who even says, where you been, officer, whatever your name is? Boy, you wouldn't believe it. I'm sorry I'm late, Sarge. I've been caught up in dealing with the adverse effects of not liking a milkshake and getting compensated for it. What? Outrageous. We'll soon, we'll see about that. We'll get satisfaction for you. We'll dispatch the emergency service unit. And in the meantime, you wait here for 2 hours and then rush to the hospital. I mean, okay. Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Sarge, I've just come from a horrible shake attack incident, and I feel awful. Maybe I should go to the hospital. Yes, rush to the hospital. Then we'll wait 2 hours to send the emergency service unit to investigate the clear crime. I don't know. So it's this 2 hours where we really need the explanation. I'm glad that they are exposing this, but the New York Post has spent too long on what flavors were the milkshake and where's the Shake Shack that they got it from. And then they blow past the part about, hey, how did this happen anyway? I mean, unless there's more. Maybe there is. Let's keep going. Maybe I spoke too soon, but really, put this up at the top. That's the lead. The three were rushed to Bellevue Hospital because they were crazy. I don't know. All right, that's insulting. But anyway, they were rushed to Bellevue Hospital where they were examined and released without ever showing symptoms, sources said, because they didn't have any. Meanwhile, a lieutenant, now we're up to lieutenant, which I assume is higher than a sergeant, right? He is in the Army. A lieutenant from the Bronx blasted out an email to the unions that 6 cops started, because 6 cops now, we've doubled the number, quote, started throwing up after drinking beverages they got from Shake Shack, which they didn't even bother to capitalize, on 200 Broadway, unquote. It was unclear why the sergeant and lieutenant escalated the situation. Well, it was unclear why the cops escalated the situation by telling them. Detectives easily closed the case, because they're so good, after interviewing 5 employees and reviewing surveillance footage showing the shakes were made normally, sources said. The machine was cleaned before the officers ordered. How do you like that? How dare you sons of bitches, cleaning your machine while you at a fry? That's where we were that night when the cops were issuing the press releases. The machine was cleaned before the officers ordered, according to sources, and it still contained residual milkstone remover. I'm at a loss, but it's a thing. It's a typically acidic solution used to combat buildup in dairy equipment. I had no idea, but in the milkshake biz, they know all about this. Milkstone. I got a couple of milkstones I need removed. All right. But by 10:45 p.m., and where are we here? The fast food, the emergency service unit went there at 9:20, 2 hours after they got the shakes. So they got the shakes around, or nearly, it was around 7:30. By 9:20, the emergency service unit is there. By 10:45 p.m., the Detectives Endowment Association. That's like fiscal endowment, like you would have at a college. Not like you got to call the doctor 4 hours later if things are going wrong. The Detectives Endowment Association was declaring that Finest, New York's Finest, that Finest had become, quote, ill after being, quote, intentionally poisoned by one or more workers at the Shake Shack, unquote. As Police Benevolent Association President Pat Lynch, the crazy a-hole who runs that place, made a show of visiting Bellevue while his union declared at 10:47 p.m. that police officers came, quote, under attack from a, quote, toxic substance believed to be bleach. Where did they get any of this? And the answer is nobody knows, and neither do you, because it's not in the story. But I really thought we would get to it. Both messages flurried across social media, spawning a trending hashtag boycott Shake Shack that was, hashtag, you see, I said hashtag when I mean # boycott Shake Shack hashtag, get it? That was still being tweeted Sunday by users who appeared to erroneously believe NYPD members were intentionally poisoned. Around 3 a.m., June 16th, the department was reviewing a statement on the matter, and at 4 a.m., they're up all night with this, just over 8 hours after the cops picked up their shakes, Chief of Detectives Rodney Harrison announced on Twitter that there was, quote, no criminality, except for the criminality of the cops who did this insane crap after the stupid story broke. The unions later deleted their tweets and issued statements walking back their discredited claims. Privately, they blamed the lieutenant who first raised the alarm. Okay, good. Now, at least we have. So basically, the real story here, without saying it, is the cops said, I just had a milkshake. How was it? Bad. And the lieutenant said, you've been attacked with chemical weapons, and we'll go from there. So, okay, we blame the lieutenant, I guess. That, however, didn't stop City Council Speaker Corey Johnson, Democrat of Manhattan, and Councilman Richie Torres, Democrat of the Bronx, from demanding a probe into the union's alleged inflammatory behavior. A review of the incident and how it unfolded is ongoing, according to an NYPD spokeswoman. So, the answer is, how did conspiracy theories about the NYPD Shake Shack poisoning blow up? Asks or says that's what we're supposed to get from this story, according to the headline. And the answer is somebody made some conspiracy theories up. That's not exactly how it happened. It's that it happened. And we possibly blame the lieutenant, I guess. And it's somebody else is going to do the investigation and finding out how. And we hope that they have better luck in nailing it down, I guess. But still, it's an important follow-up because it's so unbelievable. It sums up the whole problem with policing activities that we have everywhere, even without involving a shooting. The cops are paranoid a-holes. At least their union leadership certainly is, and maybe it trickles down from the top. And now you have police, the woman in, I don't know, where the hell were they? I can't even remember where she was. Videotaping herself crying in her car because she's afraid that her Egg McMuffin's been poisoned, all needlessly. But I wonder, the stress of the job, the insistence by their unions that they're constantly under attack, and maybe in no small part the fact that they spend so much time at indoor shooting ranges with lead dust in the air. I don't know. I think bad combination. Maybe we need to give everybody permanent time off and $4,000 to go on vacation with, and then just hire some new people. This is bad news. Anyway, so thanks to the New York Post for next to nothing, but I'm glad you brought the story up. Gave us a lot of detail to talk about, just no real answers, but that's not necessarily on you. The real fact is that the answers have to come from police, and they're not going to be willing to give up the real truth about how it happened because it means saying, I made that up, me personally, and they're not going to admit to that. But just one of a million stories of cops that make stuff up. Really crystalline example of how they operate sometimes. Okay, let's see. Is this Is there more from this one? I think I put this one aside for us to take a look at from the New York Times about the situation in the Southern District of New York. And I think it was a summary of all that had happened and, and maybe some updates from it from Katie Benner and Sharon Lafreniere, if I'm pronouncing that one correctly, over at the New York Times about Bill Barr, pardon me, and how he appears to have been freelancing once again on behalf of Donald Trump, which I think raises the larger question that we've raised here before, not only in our continuing demand for the paperwork behind everything that the president claims to have done, but as a reminder to everybody that this is more or less an illegally operating regime. Donald Trump having no idea really how to do any of these things. I think he has come to the conclusion that the best executive move for him is to tell people who allege that they understand how the levers of government work, you're free to do whatever you want, and in case you need to get anything done, drop my name and say I authorized it, which is not really the way things are supposed to work, and it's not clear that that is effective in getting anything done. I think that's what happened here with the Southern District of New York. Most people are more focused on why they wanted to do that, and that's really the more important, well, I don't know if it's really the more important story, but it's certainly the more interesting to most readers. I think the story that's being missed here is that I think Trump's entire administration is just operating illegally. And it may be that almost nothing that he's done has been properly authorized, and that a look back, since we'll never have that look back, but a serious look back on just at the paperwork and the process and the procedure that they used to get to the places they purported to be going would reveal none of this is actually real, and you can ignore it all, including possibly his election. So whatever. For Barr, standoff with prosecutor adds to string of miscues is the title of the piece. The Attorney General has found himself at odds with the White House on high-profile issues in recent weeks. But I think the real story here is that he believes he had been given the go-ahead by Trump to speak for him, which is an outrageous usurpation of presidential powers, and he should be impeached for it. And I'm not kidding. From the onset of his tenure, the story begins, William P. Barr has been billed as the Attorney General that President Trump was looking for, and Mr. Barr has taken some pride in this role, telling Fox News this past weekend that he speaks with the president, quote, very regularly. But for a man who projects unswerving confidence in his political and legal skills, his efforts this month to play presidential intimate have backfired, embarrassing both him and his boss. The month has brought a string of unusually high-profile miscues for the Attorney General. He's been at odds with the White House at critical moments, showing how even top administration officials known for their loyalty can fall out of sync with the president, laser-focused on his own political popularity. It's a very gentle way of putting it, quite honestly. You can be at odds with the president because he's wildly, mercurially, idiotically, psychopathic kind of guy. And if you follow, the path of his logic, you will be led astray because he's not using any. If you think logic is what underlies these things, you'll be naturally led to the wrong conclusion. You'll find yourself hung out to dry when he swerves for non-logical reasons. Mr. Barr came under fire for his role in ordering federal officers to clear Lafayette Square near the White House on June 1st, just before Mr. Trump's widely criticized photo op in front of a nearby church. He annoyed some White House officials when he said the Secret Service had earlier ordered Mr. Trump to shelter in the building's bunker because of the threat of violence from protesters. That contradicted Mr. Trump's explanation. He was merely inspecting the bunker, not seeking protection. Side note, he was seeking protection. Barr was right. Trump was lying. But the prerogative, the press makes it the prerogative of the president to dictate the narrative. And everybody else is out of step because they're only there to serve the president. That's the traditional model, and the press will not relinquish that. It's not going to let go of it. And Mr. Trump distanced himself almost immediately from his and Mr. Barr's decision last week to fire Jeffrey S. Berman as the top federal prosecutor in Manhattan, even though he had discussed the move with Mr. Barr and a possible successor to Mr. Berman, according to two people briefed on the deliberations. Again, his prerogative to set the narrative. Mr. Barr asked Mr. Berman to leave on Friday afternoon, and he announced the prosecutor's resignation on Friday night after Mr. Berman refused to go, essentially firing him in public. Mr. Berman then publicly declared that he was not going anywhere, facing a public relations debacle and legal constraints that made it difficult for Mr. Barr to get rid of Mr. Berman. The Attorney General was forced to ask the President to step in and officially fire him. But soon after, Senator Lindsey Graham, you know him, and stupid construction of the sentence forces me to do it this way. Soon after, Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina and chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, suggested he would not merely rubber stamp an administration nominee to replace Mr. Berman. Mr. Trump backed away from the whole affair. We spent very little time talking about it, he told Fox News on Saturday. But the president has to sign a document, or I guess give the okay. The result was that Mr. Barr looked as though he had acted without the full backing of the president, which he did. He also ended up agreeing to install Mr. Berman's deputy, Audrey Strauss, as the acting U.S. attorney instead of his preferred pick, Craig Carpentino, now the top federal prosecutor for New Jersey. Carpentino, I think now, says he had no idea all of this was going on, and he only agreed to take the temporary posting in New York because he heard Berman was resigning. Now that he knows more about it, he says, I'm not going to do it, which is a good way of distancing yourself from the natural scrutiny that would follow from finding out that Trump and or Barr thought that a good, loyal replacement for Berman would be Carpentino. Now it makes you wonder what's been going on in New Jersey. Anyway, as attempted power plays go, this was an abject failure and served only to further undermine the credibility of both the Attorney General and the President, said Greg Brower, a former federal prosecutor who once headed the FBI's Congressional Affairs Office. A Justice Department spokeswoman declined to comment for this article. Even when a judge made favorable statements about the possibility of a legal victory for Trump this month, it was eclipsed by the Berman debacle. A federal judge ruled that the former National Security Advisor John Bolton may be in jeopardy of forfeiting his $2 million advance, or even be prosecuted for failing to scrub classified information out of his new book, as Justice Department lawyers had argued that he was legally required to do. Jody Hunt, by the way, signing that brief. But the judge refused to order copies of the political memoir seized, noting that more than 200,000 of them were already in the hands of booksellers by the time the department acted. So it's like guns, too many of them out there. The reasons the department filed so long after the books had been distributed to booksellers is not clear, but days before the judge ruled, the department's division that was handling the case suddenly found itself rudderless. Joseph H. Hunt, the chief of the civil division, suddenly resigned without even informing Mr. Barr, who had sometimes bypassed him to deal directly with his deputies. Mr. Barr's penchant for closely managing his staff and impatience with what he sees as too much deliberation have grown in recent weeks, according to department employees who have sat in on meetings with him. Mr. Hunt's departure also seemed to emphasize the risks of handling cases involving Mr. Trump's associates in Mr. Barr's Justice Department. Other federal prosecutors have either resigned or withdrawn from criminal prosecutions of Mr. Trump's former aides after Mr. Barr intervened to drop charges or seek lighter punishment. That's the Mike Flynn case, of course. The month began with a blast of criticism over the law enforcement response to the protests outside the White House that began May 29th over the death of George Floyd. Again, you know who he is. I just don't need to spend limited time on that. I don't want to gloss past it. It's just, you know how these things go in the newspapers. While the protest was largely peaceful, some demonstrators threw bricks at the Secret Service, they say. Others defaced the Treasury Department building next to the White House with graffiti, and several broke through a police barricade before being arrested. Just before Mr. Trump set out across Lafayette Square to hold a Bible in front of St. John's Church on June 1st, law enforcement officials fired a chemical irritant at the crowd to clear the area. Gee whiz, that's so controversial. Anyway, Barr played a far more critical role in the law enforcement response than was initially understood, essentially assuming battlefield, wrong word, control over a hodgepodge, right word, of security forces in Washington for days from a command center he set up, according to people who received briefings inside the center. He was effectively the general overseeing the operation that allowed the president his photo op. As criticism deepened over the havoc surrounding the photo op, Mr. Barr insisted that he took charge because the protest was turning violent and had to be brought under control, not to set up a publicity stunt. But his presence at Mr. Trump's side that day made him look less like a commander of officers and more like a presidential prop, a situation he privately said made him uncomfortable. According to two people told of these conversations. So private he is. In a June 5th interview with the Associated Press, the Attorney General gave a hair-splitting description of his role directing the law enforcement actions. He never issued a tactical command to clear the protesters from Lafayette Square, he said, but his attitude was that officers needed to, quote, get it done. So, why don't you just ism taking over again? Barr also insisted 2 days later in an interview with CBS's Face the Nation that both he and Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper agreed that as a last resort, the president could invoke the Insurrection Act, allowing him to deploy active duty troops to control protests around the nation, a notion that Mr. Esper had previously seemed to disavow. The controversy was still fresh when the Justice Department, under pressure from a federal lawsuit, released some passages last week that Barr and his aides had previously redacted from the 2019 public report by special counsel Robert Mueller about Russian interference in the 2016 election. Although Barr has aggressively challenged the basis for that whole inquiry and defended the president, the newly discovered text showed that prosecutors questioned whether Mr. Trump was telling them the truth in written answers to their questions. He wasn't. The situation with Berman, the top prosecutor from New York, again raised the question of whether Barr was bending over backward to protect the president. A Republican, Berman pursued a string of cases that have rankled Trump, including an investigation of hush payments to Stormy Daniels, you know all about that one, and probably maybe some of the other hush payments he's paid. Berman also obtained an indictment of a state-owned bank in Turkey with political connections that had drawn the president's attention. In his book, Bolton wrote that Trump had promised the president of Turkey, Erdogan, in 2018 that he would intervene in the inquiry against the bank for violating sanctions against Iran. Multiple people close to both Berman and Barr said both men felt that charges needed to be brought, but that they clashed over questions of law and strategy. Prosecutors under Berman were scrutinizing whether the president's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, violated laws on lobbying for foreign entities in his efforts to dig up damaging information in Ukraine on the president's political rivals. If the Trump administration was hoping to exert political pressure to derail that investigation, some former prosecutors said, firing Berman appears to have backfired. The Berman situation was mishandled, both procedurally and substantively, said Mr. Brower, the former federal prosecutor and senior FBI official. The Southern District of New York continues to investigate whatever it's investigating, and Barr's preferred new U.S. attorney doesn't actually get the job. So there you go. I think we're up to date on the backfiring, but more importantly, I think further speculation about whether Barr is in fact just being waved off by Trump and say, go do whatever you want to do and just drop my name and get it done. But if you drop my name and I don't like it, or it's getting me in trouble, I will disavow it. And are other cabinet level or other top senior advisors and officials doing the same thing, and how frequently? So I don't know. It's something that we ought to be looking into, and I hope, I've had my eye on it for a long time. I'm hoping that the mainstream press is waking up to it too and is willing to say so. All right, let's see. We got mere seconds left here before we have to start making our exit and handing things over to Justice Putnam. But I do have one or two more stories that not super important, but I thought I'd share with you just so they're on your radar. This was an interesting one. Talking Points Memo is the first place that I saw this one. I don't know whether they picked it up from somewhere else, but here's your headline. Nigel Farage, remember him? Nigel Farage scores entry to U.S., even though he's coming from the U.K., from which travel is banned because of COVID-19. Scores entry into the U.S. for Trump's rally. How? Under the National Interest Allowance. In case you were wondering whether, as I've speculated for a long time on a number of things, the Trump administration is taking advantage of the tremendous leeway ordinarily afforded to the executive branch and to the office of the president to simply order things be made true or to make various findings. I've described how certain laws have certain serious restrictions on what the president can do or the executive branch can do, unless the president finds that XYZ is in the national interest or serves some national security purpose, and they could just wing it and say, hell, it just does. And that's kind of effectively what other administrations do, but they usually task someone with writing up some crap that makes it look like they gave it some real serious thought. Here they just say it's in the national interest. What they did here, Nigel Farage, by all rights, should have been banned from travel to the United States, not just because he's Nigel Farage and we should ban him anyway, but because of COVID-19, right? He's coming from another highly infected area that we've blocked travel from. But he's a friend of the president's. But that's not on the list of things that allow you to give an exception. What is there is if it's in the national interest. So they just said, just write down it's in the national interest. Now, what could possibly be in the national interest of having Nigel Farage here? Nothing. Even worse, there's no possible way it could be in the national interest to bring him here for a non-official event, a political event taking place in Tulsa, of all places. There's really no excuse for it, but they did it anyway because, who's stopping them? They haven't stopped them from violating the Hatch Act or any other law, so what the hell? Just go ahead and do it. So they did. Just thought you'd like to know.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
There's much more, of course, but those I can save for another day. Now time for those things that can't wait another day. Justice Putnam will bring them to you on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next right here on Netroots Radio. I'll tell you, I'm glancing over it. It looks great. It's the biggest teaser I can give you. I can't fit in all these fantastic stories. That's his job. Let him do it. Thanks.